I was fixing the corner post on the east side of my barn when I heard it. That sound no barn floor should ever make. Hollow, like a cough in a crypt. It stopped me cold. This barn was built by my grandfather, Amos Langston, with his own 2 hands and a stubborn back full of pride. I'd grown up under these rafters, throwing hay, chasing chickens, nursing foals. The floor had always been solid, packed down with earth and sweat and generations of footsteps. But this spot, right near the feed bins, sounded wrong. I knelt down, pressing my ear to the floorboards. At first, nothing. Then I knocked my knuckles against the planks, and there it was again, a soft drumbeat of air beneath wood. I sat back on my heels, sweat cold on my neck. This barn was supposed to have a packed earth floor, no cellar, no basement, nothing. Just dust, clay, and maybe a gopher hole if you were unlucky. My granddad used to joke that secrets couldn't hide in a barn, everything was always out in the open. Turns out, he was wrong. I grabbed my crowbar and wedged it under the first board. It groaned like it hadn't been touched in decades. Then I lifted another and another until a black square of space yawned up at me. A hole. No, more than that. A tunnel. A narrow staircase led downward into dark earth. Built with care, old timber, hand-hewn, tight-fitting joints. Not some lazy bootlegger's crawl space. This was craftsmanship. And something else caught my eye. Footprints. Fresh ones. I saw the smudges clearly in the dust coating the top step. Boot prints smaller than mine, maybe a woman's or a young man's, going down, not up. Whoever made them hadn't come back out. My gut twisted. I thought about going back to the house, maybe grabbing my rifle, but instead I struck a match. The flame flared, trembling in the still air. I lit the lantern hanging by the feed door and held it out over the opening. The tunnel descended maybe 10 feet, then turned sharply to the left, vanishing into darkness. Something in me knew I shouldn't go down there, that whatever waited wasn't meant to be disturbed. But the Langstons don't run from the truth, no matter how ugly. That's what my father always said. So I stepped down, one boot at a time, into the cold mouth of the earth. The air grew damp, heavy. The kind of air that remembered things. The wood walls were lined with old nails, some holding rusted hooks, others dangling with scraps of cloth or old twine. I saw initials carved in the beam at the turn, A.L. 1937, my grandfather's mark. This wasn't new, this was old, hidden, intentional. And as I rounded the bend and saw the chamber beyond, a small earthen room with wooden shelves, a cracked leather satchel, and a lantern already burning on the far wall, I realized something even more disturbing. Someone had been living here. Recently. The satchel was unzipped, stuffed with canned peaches, jerky, a rusted revolver, and a yellowed envelope. A bedroll lay flattened in the corner, and on the table sat a tin coffee cup, still half full. I stood frozen. Someone had made a home under my feet, and I hadn't known a damn thing.
I must have stood there 5 full minutes, just staring at the steamless cup of coffee. It hadn't been brewed this morning, but it wasn't from last year either. Someone had been here, not long ago, and they hadn't bothered to lock the place up. I stepped closer, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. The revolver was old, a .32 break top, probably hadn't fired in years. The satchel was military issue, stamped U.S. on the side and frayed at the seams. The canned food had expiration dates from 3 years ago. Who the hell had been hiding under my barn? I turned toward the shelf. That's when I saw the envelope. It was yellowed but sealed. My name was written on the front in careful black ink. Derek Langston. That's when I heard the voice. You weren't supposed to find this until next week. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the lantern. Standing at the mouth of the tunnel was a woman, mid-30s maybe, brown hair tucked under a wide-brim hat, leather coat streaked with trail dust. She looked like she'd ridden hard and hadn't slept. But what froze me wasn't the colt at her hip. It was her face. Calm. Unapologetic. Like she'd been expecting me all along. "Who the hell are you?" I asked. She stepped down slowly, her boots silent on the wood. "Olivia Harrow. My grandfather was Silas Harrow. I believe you knew his name." I did. Silas Harrow had been my grandfather's partner back in the 1930s. Briefly, the story went that Harrow skipped town after a fight over landlines. But my grandfather always said Harrow was a drunk and a liar, that he didn't trust him an inch. Olivia looked me straight in the eye. "I know what you found, and I know why you heard that sound today. You were meant to." I backed up a step. "You put that envelope down here?" She nodded. "I've been living under this barn 3 days, waiting for the expiration date." I blinked. Expiration date? Olivia reached into her coat and pulled out a folded document. I recognized the faded notary seal and the names scrawled at the bottom: Amos Langston, Silas Harrow, and William Cross. The 3 men who built this tunnel signed a private contract in 1948. It kept the truth sealed for 75 years. Today's the day it lapses, which means we can talk about what your grandfather was really doing out here. I stared at the document. The names burned like brands. "What truth?" I asked. Olivia gave a sad little smile. "That a third of this land belongs to me, and another third to the Cross family. Your grandfather didn't own what he passed down to you, Derek. He leased it with a handshake, a lie, and 75 years of silence." My knees nearly buckled. "This is my land, Langston land." "Not anymore. Not once we open the chamber." "The what?" She gestured toward the far end of the tunnel, toward a braced wall of beams and stone I hadn't noticed before. "There's a second room behind that wall," Olivia said, "and I think it's time you saw what your grandfather was hiding." I didn't move. I couldn't. Everything in me wanted to deny it, shout her down, chase her out. But the truth had a smell to it, cold and metallic, like old blood or tarnished silver, and it was rising all around us.
We stood in front of that braced wall for a long time, saying nothing. Olivia had lit another lantern and hung it on a rusted nail driven into the timber sport. The light flickered across the stone, dancing over cracks sealed with old mortar. "How do you know what's behind it?" I finally asked. "My grandfather told my father, and he told me, just enough to keep the chain intact. I was raised on stories about what these men buried down here. Most thought it was superstition, family legend, but I never forgot it. And when I found the contract in my father's desk drawer after he passed, I started digging. That's how I ended up here." Before I could respond, a sound cut through the silence above us. Hooves. More than one. Then voices. Olivia's head snapped up. "They're here." "Who's they?" "The Cross family." I rushed up the stairs and out into the barn, squinting against the sudden daylight. 3 riders were dismounting outside the open doors. They looked like they rode straight out of a frontier dime novel. Broad hats, long coats, dusty boots. One of them, tall and lean with a sharp nose and a gray beard, stepped forward and nodded at me. "Derek Langston?" "Yeah. I'm Marcus Cross. My great-grandfather William helped build what's under your feet, and by the looks of it, the timer's run out." "How the hell did you know?" "We got our letter same as you." He held up a thick envelope with my name on it. Identical handwriting. Same black ink. I looked back at Olivia, who'd emerged from the tunnel, arms crossed. She and Marcus didn't look surprised to see each other. Marcus stepped into the barn and gave a long, low whistle. Damn, I haven't seen this place since I was 5. You've been here before? I asked. My daddy brought me once. Said we had rights under this roof, but not until the clock ran out. Said it wasn't safe to talk about until then. The other 2 riders followed him in, silent, watchful. We lit more lanterns and descended together, 3 family lines converging underground, bound by ink and blood and buried truths. Back in the tunnel, Marcus stared at the sealed chamber wall. So it's real, he muttered. He wasn't just blowing smoke. He wasn't, Olivia said. What's back there? I asked again. Marcus looked at me, then at Olivia. You really don't know? I shook my head. Marcus let out a low breath. Silver. A vein of it, richer than anything they'd ever seen. Your grandfather, my great-grandfather, and Harrow's kin found it by accident when they were digging a storm cellar in 37, but it was on federal land, technically, and mining it was illegal, so they built this tunnel, reinforced it, and mined it in secret. I felt dizzy. All those years, I said, the money my granddad made, the land he expanded, built on stolen ore, Marcus said. They smelted it in Tucson, sold it under fake names, hid it away. But when the war started, they buried what was left behind this wall and sealed it, made a pact none of us were supposed to know until 75 years passed. And now? Olivia asked. Marcus looked grim. Now, we see what's left. We worked in silence, prying loose the beams, scraping mortar, chipping stone. Dust filled the tunnel like smoke. Finally, with a heave, the wall cracked open. Behind it, a hollow chamber glowed with the promise of history. Shelves lined the walls. But they weren't filled with silver. They were empty. Every single shelf, bare. A wave of silence crushed us. No, Olivia whispered. This can't be. Marcus stormed inside, dragging his lantern along the walls. It was here. My father saw it. He described the stacks. Dozens of bars. Hundreds. But all we found were boot prints in the dust. Newer than any 75-year-old trace. Someone had been here. Someone had cleaned it out. And none of us had seen it coming. The silence after that discovery felt heavier than stone. None of us spoke for a long while, just the crackle of our lanterns and the soft crunch of boots on dust. Marcus ran his hands over one of the shelves, disbelief carved deep into his face. Gone, he muttered. All of it, gone. I stepped back, trying to make sense of it. The tunnel, the contract, the families drawn here like iron to a magnet, all of it had led to this chamber. But the treasure was already gone. Someone had beaten us to it. Olivia was pacing now, muttering under her breath, hands clenched at her sides. Maybe someone broke the seal early, she said. Maybe they found out about the silver and snuck in before the contract ended. I looked sharply at her. You were here before anyone. You knew about the tunnel. You knew when the agreement expired. Her snapped to mine. You think I took it? I don't know what to think. You saw my camp, jerky, peaches, and a busted revolver. Does that look like someone who just struck rich? Marcus cleared his throat. There's another possibility. We both turned to him. He pulled a folded paper from his coat, a legal document, maybe 10 pages thick. About a month ago, I got contacted by a man claiming to be an estate lawyer out of Santa Fe. Said the Cross family had unclaimed mineral assets in Arizona. He He said he was working on behalf of some mining group and wanted to talk buyouts. Wait, what? I said. I thought it was a scam, but he knew details, the names, the map coordinates. He knew about the expiration date. Said he had power of attorney from one of the Langston heirs. My stomach dropped. I didn't sign anything. I don't even have a lawyer. Olivia looked shaken. Neither did I. I haven't talked to anyone outside my mother's hospice nurse in months. Then someone forged your names, he said. Who? I asked. He held up the document. I can't prove it yet, but the name on the cover letter was Olivia Harrow. The color drained from her face. I never signed anything, I swear to God, Derek. But someone pretending to be you did, which means whoever took the silver knew all our names, all the dates, and exactly when to move. We all stared at each other. The unease deepened. This wasn't just about legacy anymore. Someone had orchestrated this, knew the moment we'd all come sniffing around, and emptied the vault before we ever lit our lanterns. We went back upstairs and pulled out the old desk from the feed room. Inside were deeds, ledgers, notebooks, and tucked behind the bottom drawer, a thin envelope marked with wax seal I'd never seen before. Marcus opened it and read aloud. To the heirs of Amos Langston, Silas Harrow, and William Cross. If you are reading this, then the silver is gone, as it should be. You were never meant to inherit blood money. Your grandfathers weren't pioneers. They were thieves. He stopped reading. The rest was blank. We stood in the barn, three strangers tied by blood and betrayal, with nothing to show for it but dust and an empty vault. It was Olivia who said it first. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone lured us here, timed it perfectly, and they're watching right now to see what we do next. I looked out the barn doors toward the hills. Someone had outplayed us, and now they have the silver. But what they didn't know was that we weren't done digging yet.
The next night, the three of us sat in the Langston kitchen. Me, Marcus, and Olivia, nursing mugs of coffee none of us really drank. The silver was gone, the chamber was stripped, the contract was real, but nothing made sense. We were still spinning theories, a forged power of attorney, a shell mining company, maybe even a mole in the land registrar's office, when the wind changed. I'll never forget that sound. Not the horses, not the footsteps, but the soft, deliberate applause. Clap, clap, clap. We looked up toward the back doorway, where a woman stood silhouetted against the lantern light. She wore a duster coat the color of charcoal, black gloves, and silver hair pulled into a low braid. Her face was lined, but not old. Sharp eyes, steady posture. She looked like someone who had come a long way and hadn't been surprised once on the entire trip. "Well," she said, stepping inside. "Seems the children have found the grown-up table." Marcus stood, hand at his belt. "Who the hell are you?" She didn't blink. "Elena Vasquez." The name didn't hit me right away, but when Olivia dropped her mug, I knew. "Elena Vasquez?" she whispered. "As in Roberto Vasquez?" Elena nodded once. "My grandfather." My throat tightened. The name was in one of Amos's old journals, barely legible, scrawled next to a single word. Regret. Elena stepped forward and pulled something from her coat, a leather-bound journal, weathered, stitched along the spine with old fishing line. She laid it on the table between us. "This was written by my grandfather in 1851, she said. "It details every foot of tunnel dug, every ounce of silver extracted, and every deal made in blood and shadows." I flipped through the first pages.
The script was careful, in Spanish and English both. It told of Roberto discovering the silver, working it alone at first, then bringing in 3 men he thought were partners. Langston, Harrow, Cross. The journal got darker as it went on. Arguments, disputes over share, accusations of greed. Then a meeting, an ambush, a gunshot. I felt sick. Elena said nothing as we read, just stood near the wall watching us crumble under the weight of what we were seeing. He trusted them, she said quietly, and they killed him for it, buried him in the dark and stole everything. Then they made a pact to seal the truth. Marcus shook his head, stunned. Why wait until now to show us this? Because the statute of fraud expired. The land agreement was never filed legally, only notarized. I've waited 75 years to confront the families of the men who took everything from mine. Olivia's voice cracked. You think we're guilty for what they did? No, Elena said, but you benefited. You inherited land that was never yours. You built homes over a grave you didn't know existed. And now, whether you like it or not, the debt has come due. I stood, the chair legs scraping wood. If what you say is true, then show us. Show us where they buried him. Elena held my gaze. I will, she said. But you better be ready to see it. Because once we do, you don't get to pretend anymore. Not one of you. We rode out before dawn, with shovels, lanterns, and that damn journal tucked under my arm. We weren't going to find treasure. We were going to find a body. And none of us knew what would be left of ourselves once we did.
We rode out before sunrise, the sky the color of old bruises and the wind sharp enough to sting. Elena led us through the hills behind the barn, following ridge lines and dry creek beds like she'd memorized them in another life. No one spoke. The journal sat heavy in my saddlebag, its pages burned into my brain. I couldn't stop seeing the words, Roberto's careful handwriting turning desperate, paranoid, then silent. After nearly 2 hours, Elena dismounted near a stand of mesquite trees at the base of a craggy rise. She walked without hesitation, her boots crunching on the frost-hardened soil. There, she said, pointing to the rock face. At first I didn't see anything, just scrub and stone. But as I got closer, I noticed a faint line running vertically across the stone. Mortar. Someone had built a false wall here. Marcus ran his hand along it. Looks like it's been patched more than once. Help me, I said. We worked in silence, chipping and prying until the wall cracked and a section crumbled inward, revealing darkness beyond. The smell hit us first. Not death, but earth. Cold, stale, undisturbed. We stepped inside. It wasn't a tunnel. It was a chamber. Small, square, lined with dry stacked stone. And at the far end, a skeleton. Curled against the wall, arms drawn in tight, boots still half laced on the bones, the skull bore a clean hole above the left eye. Buried, beneath the gold. A rusted revolver lay nearby, along with a crushed tin flask and a small folded cross carved from bone. Elena stepped forward, kneeling slowly. She touched the edge of the boot, then pulled a photograph from her coat, an old daguerreotype of a young man with thick hair and gentle eyes. She held it up beside the bones. Roberto Vasquez, she said softly. He was 27. No one said a word. The truth didn't scream. It whispered. Olivia finally broke the silence. He was alone. Yes, Elena said. He waited in the tunnel while they went to get papers.
Only one came back with a gun. Marcus's jaw tightened. They lied about everything. My whole damn family line built on this? I felt something crumple inside me. The weight of the Langston name, the pride I used to feel about this land, the stories about hard work and honest men. All of it was built on this grave. I can't live here anymore, not after seeing this. Olivia leaned against the wall, eyes brimming. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We thought we inherited land, not a lie. Elena stood, brushing dust from her knees. You didn't choose this. But now you know, and knowing comes with responsibility. What do you want us to do? Marcus asked. She looked at each of us. Make it right. We sealed the chamber again, not to hide it, but to protect it. Elena said she'd contact the historical board, have Roberto buried properly, with a name, a real marker. The three of us stood outside that hill for a long time, not saying much. The wind picked up, a hawk circled high above. None of us were the same men or women who'd stepped into that tunnel days before. We weren't heirs anymore. We were witnesses. And that was something you could never unbecome.
Back at the ranch, the land felt different, not just in weight or meaning, but in presence, like it was watching us now, measuring us against what had come before. Olivia sat on the porch swing, absently turning her father's pocket watch in her hand. Marcus stood near the barn doors, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette like it might help him make sense of anything. Elena leaned against the fence, watching the horizon with eyes that held decades. I've spoken to a land rights lawyer, she finally said. The contracts your family signed weren't legally enforceable after expiration. The mine was unregistered. The claim was stolen. The silver, regardless of who took it, was extracted from Vasquez discovery land. That makes me the only surviving heir with original rights. No one argued. I sat on the top step, arms on my knees, letting the dust settle around the moment. What happens now? Marcus asked. That's up to you, Elena said. I have no interest in vengeance, but this land was bought with blood, my grandfather's. And every dollar that came from it, every acre it bought, was part of that theft. Olivia stood, shoulders squared. You want the ranch? I want the truth acknowledged. And I want the land returned, not just this house or this barn. All of it. Silence again. Olivia's hands trembled. My mother's ashes are scattered under the cottonwoods. This is the only home I've ever known. Elena nodded solemnly. Then let it be a home built on truth, not silence. Marcus let out a long breath. I can't speak for the Crosses. My siblings won't give up a damn thing without a fight. But me? I'm done. I've worked for years on borrowed land and borrowed pride. It's yours. He pulled out his penknife and dug a corner of the barn wall, carved a rough C next to the initials already there. Then he stepped back. I looked at Olivia. Her eyes were rimmed red, but she gave the faintest nod. We sign it over tomorrow, I said. Elena looked at me. And you, Derek? I glanced at the hill in the distance, at the shape of the earth I now knew was a grave. My grandfather built this place. But he also buried a man and called it a legacy. That's not something I can pass on. I walked over to my father's old desk,
still in the corner of the barn, pulled open the drawer, took out the title deed. Then I grabbed a pen and signed it away. When Olivia added her name beside mine, her hand trembled. We left the barn together. No speeches, no ceremony. Just quiet resolve. And when Elena tucked the papers into her coat, I swear the wind stopped. Like even the land was holding its breath. We didn't inherit land. We inherited a wound. And now, maybe, it could finally heal.
3 days later, I stood inside the county clerk's office with my hat in my hands and a knot in my chest. The papers had been notarized. The signatures were final. The Langston land was no longer mine. The woman at the desk stamped the last page and smiled politely, not knowing the weight of what she was sealing. Elena Vasquez stood beside me, dressed in a simple blouse and worn boots. She didn't gloat, didn't grin. She just watched the ink dry with quiet reverence. When it was done, she turned to me. "You did the right thing." I nodded. "Still feels like cutting off my own arm." "You gave it a proper burial," she said. "That's something." Outside, Olivia was waiting under the courthouse awning. She'd brought flowers for the new grave, the one we'd built out by the ridge, a headstone carved with Roberto Vasquez's name, the first time it had ever appeared in stone. She'd chosen the words, "Not forgotten, not forgiven, but finally seen." Marcus didn't come. He'd left town that morning, said he needed to disappear for a while. Said he might head north, start over under his mother's name. I couldn't blame him. The silver was still missing, and we had no way to trace it. The lawyer who'd contacted Marcus was a ghost. The building listed on his letterhead had burned down 4 years ago. The power of attorney? Fake. Whoever took the silver had covered their tracks well. But Elena didn't care about the treasure. She used what little she had to fund a community library near Tucson in her grandfather's name. She said the rest of the land would be placed in trust, not for profit, but for preservation. Not wealth, memory. I stood outside the courthouse a long while, staring at the street, the wagon ruts, the dust, the history. Then I climbed onto my horse and looked west. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't have a deed or a plan or a damn thing in my pocket but a few coins and a dry map. But I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's sins anymore. I was free. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough.